Welcome to another Teaching with Dr. Mo. I'm Dr. Mo, and in today's teaching, we will be learning about location in the basic recipe and how much it matters. And we're also going to be taking a deep dive into acupuncture points, their associated meridians, and of course, EFT. So let's go ahead and hop right in. And to start, I do want to talk about the origins of EFT. So EFT comes from another modality called thought field therapy, which is abbreviated TFT. And TFT was created by Dr. Roger Callahan. And what it offers is a more customized, more individualized approach to emotional freedom because it uses specific point protocols and specific or certain sequences of points that are tailored to whatever a person is experiencing, their issue, whether it be physical or emotional, or their pattern, or just their general client presentation. On the other hand, EFT uses the same point protocol for every single person, regardless of their issue, regardless of their pattern, or how they are presenting in a session. So EFT very much offers a standardized approach to emotional freedom, which is not only advantageous because it's very user-friendly, right? You can teach anyone how to use the basic recipe because it's the same regardless of what you're tapping on. And it's also easier to research the efficacy of EFT because this point protocol is codified, it's standardized, and it's the basic recipe over and over and over again, regardless of who's using it. So those are the advantages of EFT, but there's also much advantage to using special or specific point protocols for certain issues or for how your client is presenting at the time. And this is something that TFT promotes. And this individualized, specialized approach to treatments or to sessions is very much the ethos of Chinese medicine and acupuncture. Individualized medicine for the individual. So does this make EFT inferior to TFT because EFT uses the basic recipe and TFT uses customized point protocols? And I'd have to say no. And the research does show this as well. So despite EFT being standardized and despite the basic recipe being the same for each person, it still shows clinical efficacy when working with a myriad of conditions, whether those be emotional, like PTSD or performance anxiety, or whether those issues be more physical, like fibromyalgia or weight issues. EFT is a very powerful modality for all of these conditions. So the common denominator, or I would have to say one of the common denominators between EFT and TFT is that they're both using acupuncture points. And now simply tapping on an acupuncture point elicits a physiological change in the body because as you do that, you are engaging the body's electrical system, the body's neurological system, and therefore you can make long-lasting change in the brain and in the body. So in my opinion, within the scope of EFT, it's less about the particular or the specific points that you're tapping on, but more about where you're tapping, if you're tapping on an actual acupuncture point or not. So don't get me wrong. Of course, the points in the basic recipe are highly powerful points. They're actually really heavy hitters within acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And if you want a breakdown of each point and what it does, you can check out my ebook, which I've linked in the description box below, so you can get a full look of the basic recipe, and I unpack it really well for you in that book. But if you tap on the correct location of acupuncture points within the basic recipe, you can better harness the full power of EFT. I see a lot of incorrect tapping on points in the basic recipe in videos and online, and it's not only misinformation about acupuncture and Chinese medicine, but it's also diminishing the power of EFT. because EFT holds a lot of power, but you can better harness this by being more mindful about where you are tapping when you go to tap on the points in the basic recipe. So let's talk a bit about acupoints, because this term is thrown a lot around in energy psychology, and the term acupoint or acupuncture point is more scientific than you probably would imagine. So acupoints are specific locations or hubs or nodes on the skin, and they carry special properties that other areas of the skin or non-acupuncture points do not. So in fact, Dr. Donald Kendall states that acupoints contain a significantly higher concentration of mast cells, fine lymphatics, blood capillaries, venules, and converging arterioles, along with sympathetic nerves supplying the vessels, nerve bundles, nerve plexuses, and free nerve endings. So as you can see, there's a lot happening at acupuncture points that's not happening at non-acupuncture points. And research does show that when you stimulate or you engage a real acupuncture point, as opposed to a fake one or a non-acupuncture point, the treatment is more effective. So this definitely plays into the fact that when you stimulate the points through tapping, the points in the basic recipe, you're going to increase the efficacy of that session simply by tapping on the specific location of that point. So not only are acupoints physiologically more different in nature than non-acupuncture points because of their neurological and their vascular properties, but when you tap on an actual acupuncture point in the basic recipe or in general, you are not only stimulating that point, but you're stimulating the whole meridian and the whole channel of which that point is associated with. So these meridians and these channels, they follow very precise trajectories over the surface of the body, and these pathways do not vary from person to person. According to Dr. Kendall, acupuncture channels were first mapped in the ancient times by these ancient researchers. They were just really curious scientists. So they were aware that there was a nerve sensation that was elicited from the stimulation of an acupoint, whether they did it with a needle or whether it was delivered through acupressure. There were nerve sensations that were elicited, and they propagated in a certain trajectory across the skin. And so these ancient researchers then recorded these trajectories that they found were propagating from a certain acupuncture point when it was stimulated, and that became the maps that we know now as the meridians and as the channels. So they would stimulate an acupoint on a subject, and then they would record where the subjects felt that sensation travel. For instance, if they felt the sensation travel laterally from that acupoint, or upwards from that acupoint, or down or to the right, etc. So over time, from these empirical and subjective observations, these researchers were able to create maps of their findings, which became known as the meridians and channel maps in acupuncture. Dr. Kendall goes on to state that meridians are propagation of sensation lines. He calls them PS lines, which stands for propagation of sensation, because meridians represent the pathways of a particular nerve sensation that was elicited when an acupoint was stimulated, either through tapping, acupressure, or a needle. So this is kind of like when you hit your funny bone at just the right angle, and then you feel intense shooting pain either up or down your arm, but it's only along a certain pathway, right? It's not encompassing your whole shoulder or your whole arm. It just travels a very specific pathway down your arm when you hit your funny bone. And that's the exact same concept that Dr. Kendall was describing in the past slides, that acupoints have a specific trajectory of which their sensation is propagated, and that trajectory is classified as the particular meridian or channel that they're associated with. So just to drive this point home of this relationship between acupoints and meridians, I want to mention this really cool findings from these two French researchers. I have linked their specific names in the description box below. I didn't want to butcher it, so you can find their specific names down below, but I will just be referring to them as these two French researchers. So in the 1960s, these researchers injected a radioactive substance called technetium into acupoints and non-acupoints of patients, and using very fancy nuclear scanning equipment, they tracked the flow of this radioactive substance in the body. And what they found was that at non-acupoints, that radioactive substance didn't go anywhere. It just diffused in a circle. But at the true acupuncture points, this radioactive substance followed the exact pathways that we know as acupuncture meridians. So, in summary, one of the most basic and the most important things that you can do to take your EFT to the next level is to make sure that you are tapping on the actual acupuncture points of which the basic recipe is based on. Because as we have learned in this teaching, actual acupuncture points have a lot of special properties associated with them that make them more powerful than non-acupuncture points. Tapping on actual acupuncture points within the basic recipe will stimulate meridians and channels, and therefore create a whole body experience for you and whoever you work with. So location really does matter. And as a way to help you make sure that you're tapping on actual acupuncture points in the basic recipe and adhering to their location as much as you can, I've created a free download of the specific location of each acupoint in the basic recipe, and you can find that downloadable sheet in the description box below, as well as all the resources that I used to make this video. And now, if you're interested in learning more about meridians beyond the biochemical and physiological properties, I have an ebook which I call The Basic Recipe Unpacked, in which I unpack each meridian from a spiritual and metaphysical perspective. So if you would like some more insight into the spirit of meridians and the spirit of the acupuncture points, feel free to take a look at my ebook, which I've linked in the description box below as well. So thank you so much for tuning into this teaching with Dr. Mo. I'm Dr. Mo, and we will talk and tap soon.